One interesting one for you, Yaniv, and it was related to that, and I'll broaden it a bit about the support for Hamas. I think you did mention Hamas did win an election, and so somebody's asking what is their support level like in Gaza anyway, because there is this whole question about, yes, you can eliminate the military structure and the party Hamas, but can you get rid of the idea? And I want to throw it also vice versa, because what is the situation again in Israel? We know you've had, is it 4 elections in 5 years again, where the right wing has been, there's quite a lot of support there, and that kind of brings us to this conflict between democracy and peace. What happens when democracy is voting for war?
Yeah, it's a real test of democracy as the optimal solution. What is it? The best of all the terrible options. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm sad to say it because I don't want it to be misinterpreted. But yeah, and Assad will correct me if I'm wrong. I think that Hamas does enjoy popular support among all Palestinians, and some Israelis would look at that and say, oh, well, these are the people who voted for Hamas, insisting on a continuation of an armed struggle that targets civilians specifically, instead of really getting behind the Palestinian Authority and a peaceful resolution. And that was 60%. And I think that now Hamas enjoys 70% support. And so some Israelis would look at that and say, hey, are these 15,000 or however many it is, we don't really know because the numbers aren't verified, but are these 15,000 people really just civilians? At the end of the day, they continue to support an armed struggle. They're paying the price. And I really reject that. I reject that out of hand. I think that civilians are civilians. And if you're a civilian who, for whatever reason, if it's because of pressure, if it's because you've been raised for 16 years in an open air prison where the jailers are Hamas, by the way, if you've been raised in that environment, then you don't necessarily you don't bear the personal responsibility, in my opinion, of the terrible policies of the people that are in charge. And reasonable people can disagree about that. Reasonable people can say, look at Nazi Germany, right? How many millions of Germans did the British kill? German civilians. And afterwards, there were no inquiries against the British. But only the Nazis were in charge. What about all the civilians? No, the civilians who elected them. Also, then it was only 30-something% who elected the Nazis. In this case, it's about 60% then, 70% now. So it's even more of a popular support for this resistance. So there are people who are using that to say that civilian deaths are never justified, but that there's some context there that's relevant. If these people elected, put their votes behind the continuation of a terrorist strategy to try to get to statehood, then they're bearing the personal price of that. I reject that. And I reject any targeting of civilians, and I mourn the death of any civilians as casualties in the war. But unfortunately, it is true that if the Palestinians, despite the 15,000 dead and the 10,000 of whom might be children, probably are, if there was an election today, unfortunately, the Palestinian people would very likely vote for a continuation of that. And to me, that's crazy, but that's the reality of the situation.